So we're at a job at Lane Cove where the customer has requested 2 fans to be installed either side of the living room. There is currently 2 switch wires operating 9 lights, and we are going to be splitting the circuitry into 2. So the external 6 downlights are going to be on 1 switch wire. The fans are going to be sitting on the external center downlights. We're going to be rewiring the far switch wire, which is operating 3 downlights at the moment, and relocating that to a center downlight. Because it's one lighting circuit, we're going to be getting the active from this smoke detector and wiring up the fans on a remote control. This is a drop ceiling, so we can't install any timber work up in the ceiling space. So we're going to be installing these ceiling fans with booker rods. I'll show you the process later.
Action.
Okay, so basically this is an example of a ceiling fan where there's a concrete slab above the jib rock, and because we can't put any timber, we're going to have to use these special dyno bolts. So when we push it inside the concrete slab, we put the booker rod inside, and while we're turning the booker rod, it automatically expands and it sandwiches itself inside the hole of the concrete slab. So the best step to do this is we can't really go too deep with the dyno bolt. So we're going to have to measure out the depth of the cavity between the jib rock and the concrete slab, like this. So that's the space there. And then we're going to add the dyno bolt. Add the dyno bolt. Mark it. So when we drill, we're going to stop the jib rock line with the bottom of the tape. So ready to drill. Come. Vacuum as well.
Yep. Gotcha.
Beautiful, that's been drilled. Always make sure there's a vacuum holding underneath, so there's no dust falling down as little as possible. So now we're going to be putting the dyno bolts up, and I'll show you the next step. Come closer, so we zoom into it, and zoom into here as well when I'm ready.
Oh, you're recording right now?
Yep. So this dyno bolt, the way this operates is when we put the booker rod into the concrete slab, we will turn the booker rod, which will bring the screw down. It will sandwich the booker rod with the concrete slab. Hence we said we can't go more than the depth of the dyno bolt. So the trick is, while we're hammering this up, we put a washer and a nut at the same length. So when we hit it up there, it's nice and sandwiched and it doesn't split. So what we're going to do is now put it up there and make sure it's nice and tight. So we've now installed the dyno bolts up in the cavity space. So you can see the 2 dyno bolts sitting there nicely. So when we put the booker rod in, we would screw it so the nut inside the dyno bolt sandwiches against the concrete slab. Because we've actually used this booker rod and we've used it by hammering the end of this thread, it has now cross-hatched, meaning that we won't be able to put a nut on that. So the trick is there is to use the clean side of the thread, put a nut on it, and then slowly bring that nut all the way down to here, so we can actually cut it off and unscrew it and unthread the cross-hatched thread. Just keep you in the loop. Thanks. The booker rod's been installed. We're now going to use our multi-groups and then really tighten it, make sure it's nice and tight. So the nut comes down and it sandwiches inside of that gun bolt. And you can see here I'm damaging the thread, so this is the reason why we've actually installed this nut, so when we do cut it off we can use it to clean that thread off. So now that the two booker rods are up, we've got those bolts sitting in place. Before we actually install the bracket, we're going to have to cut it to size because it's a lot more harder to cut with a hacksaw blade once this bracket's been installed. So we're going to cut it around over here, so we can, and then we can use these nuts to cross thread it, so we can reinstall another 2 more bolts. We're going to put a washer over here to use it as a nice plate for here. And then once the job's complete as well, so we're going to put another washer and then 2 nuts. I'd always like to put 2 nuts at the end of the job, so the first one secures the bracket and the second one actually uses it as a locking mechanism for the second bolt, so, or the nut, the second nut. So this is almost complete now. So we've installed the bracket now with a washer right at the end of the bracket. You can see the first nut that's been sandwiched to the maximum. We've now installed a second nut, so this acts as a sandwich for the first one. So when the fan turns, the vibration doesn't release the first nut. We've almost done the same for this side, you can see, and that will be, we might have to remove that straight connector to do it. The only thing left is the switch wire. We've already ran it. So we've ran it to the switch, which is over there, through the ceiling space, and it's sitting over here. Hopefully I can get it. You can see it. The fan's almost complete. We've now installed the receiver for the remote control. Just doing our final connections. Double screw connector for our earth, so it's nice and neat. And then we're just going to be installing the blades, do the last connection at the switch, and test it. Thank you. Fan's now complete. Ready to connect the switch wire at the switch and operate the fan.
Beautiful thing, isn't it? Nice, cool, and refreshing. This is Daniel from Mr. Switch Electrical, just finishing up the day here, putting up a few fans. Customer's house. Went into, up through gyprock, into concrete, up above. Solid ass, no wobble, nothing. 100 Pacific makes good fans. Moving along out here, put a light in between these 2 fans. Put these lights on the outside on separate switches. Separate switch, separate from that one right there. This was actually the first fan that we put up this morning here. Solid as, much cooler, much nicer.